First off, let's start off with who you are, Parris.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on here, Ty. I am beyond honored that you would ask me to be a guest, and I am very excited to share my story. So I guess here we go. I'm Parris, like you said. I was born and raised in Hayward, California, which is beautifully nestled right in the East Bay near Oakland, across the bridge from San Francisco, right there smack in beautiful California. I was very much a product of my surroundings and my upbringing. I was literally raised on the soccer field. I have an older sister and brother. My brother's 9 years older than I am, and sister who is 8 years older than I am. And my dad coached my older sister, and my younger sister and I are 19 months apart. And my dad would be coaching Penny and all of her soccer adventures, and literally running up and down the side of the field with me on one side of his hip and my younger sister, Paige, on the other side of his hip. So I literally, my roots were very much on the actual soccer field. Then the other side of me, the runner part, came because my parents did a lot of road races, like 5Ks and 10Ks, and had a jogging stroller, and threw Paige and I into the jogging stroller and would run, and not very done safely. They would actually put both of us in a single jogging stroller intended for one person, which might have lended to why I wanted to get out of the jogging stroller. It didn't take very long for me to shift from being in there to being out running alongside my dad. I very much remember one of my first 10Ks that I did, and I'm pretty positive I was about in kindergarten. And I was just always that very stubborn, I think would be the best word to describe me, individual who wanted, I think I was always trying to find where I fit in my family and my validation. And that lended well to developing the athlete that I was. So I immediately jumped out of that said jogging stroller and started running, and then had my roots that began on the track through the Catholic Youth Organization, CYO program. And I started running in kindergarten with that, and did cross country and track, and was part of every form of soccer. Soccer was very big in my family. Again, with having an older sister, my older brother played briefly as well, until he transitioned over to roller hockey, which is a whole nother story as to the interesting individual and just robust athletic upbringing that I had. My dad was a collegiate wrestler, as well as he played football. And so to kind of, I guess, forge this story forward, how I kind of had that ingrained in me as a child was my dad very much wanted to help cultivate the ability for us to be athletes, because he was the oldest of 12, coming from a very blue collar family. His parents had separated and remarried, but the bulk of his immediate brother and sisters there were 6 of them, and he was the oldest of all of them. And then you introduce all of them. Yeah, it was, and I'm incredibly grateful for who my father is and what that ingrained into us as athletes. But he, having been the oldest at the age of 18, was kicked out of the house and was kind of left on his own. And he made the junior college Chabot a 4-year institution, as he likes to tell this story, and then went on to Cal State, at the time Hayward, and started continued his wrestling career. He went on to make it to nationals. And unfortunately, though, because he was paying his way through college, was unable to actually go and compete. And he grew up with parents who didn't really understand the value of athletics. Like everything was very like work driven. You have to provide for the family. And especially coming around that time, my dad was very much a child of, he's born in the 40s. I hope my dad doesn't get offended that I'm really sharing all that. But like also graduated from high school in 66, so you throw in all of this mix and like the understanding of both the nuclear family at that point in time and the pressure on males to be the sole provider. It really lended to shape the individual that he was. And thus he found it more important at that period of time, especially without having the support system of parents to nurture that athletic achievement in him, that he ended up not going. And so what he had said to all of us kids growing up was that in order for us to go away to college and not be at home, that we had to do so on a full ride scholarship. And so I knew that my ticket out was going to be in athletics. And it's not that I wasn't an intelligent person. I just like where my heart always was on the field or on the track.
So that was a full ride for anything, not just anything. Athletics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so they literally wouldn't pay for my application fees in high school. And I wasn't working, so I couldn't actually do that. But my parents were so kind in allowing us to make sports our job in high school. I wasn't one of those kids that had parents that like forced them to get jobs, which is like good and bad. I did a lot of manual labor. Homegirl can throw a weed whacker around, which also lended to a lot of who I became like on an athletic field. But that is largely what motivated me to continue on. And that connection with my father, like both of my parents were my coaches for soccer, and as well as like for much of my life. And they also were so deeply rooted in the soccer community in Hayward. They started elementary school leagues. They started a middle school league while I was in school, as well as been also helped create a junior high cross country and track program in Hayward. So I'm so lucky. Like now in speaking through this all, like it's the immense amount of gratitude that I have for parents that really helped forge that path for me and really cultivated that, is something that I am immensely grateful for. If you would have asked me as a child, though, all I wanted to do was be a ballerina. And so, but I am very grateful for the path that I walked. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
All right. Well, that's awesome. And that's awesome, at the core of how you became an athlete and where that foundation came from, coming from your father and your mother. I had, similar for me, my dad was, he played baseball in college, but, looking back, or if I talked to him now, he'd still tell you he wasn't something he was passionate about. And I was lucky to have him as a coach. But for me, it was, he coached up until maybe about 12 years old. And at that point he said, hey, this is where it stops for me, because this is about, hitting the max of my knowledge level of the game, and this is time for you to move on to other coaches who have, spent more time investing in teaching what goes on from here. And so it was still a big part of my life, but he knew when, he had hit his ceiling in terms of a coach. And from there on, just supported as a father. My mom did too, but mom supported in a very mom-like way, where I was, the star in her eyes always. And the best damn orange slices that
a mom could
that's right. Exactly.
It's so important. And sorry, not to cut you off there, Ty, but also to I think that's such a valuable lesson of what you just said, of parents identifying when the lessons and the teachings are now out of their scope, and not letting that ego get in the way. Luckily, my younger sister and I had stepped up at one point. Let's see, we were in high school, and for our league soccer, we're we can't continue playing in our hometown league because the individuals around us aren't aligned with where they want to go. And so we ended up moving over to a neighboring city to be a part of their youth soccer program. And we're able to develop ourselves even more because of the resources at hand. And it was one of the most invaluable. It was a difficult conversation to have because my parents were so deeply rooted in our community. But what we saw ourselves becoming wasn't going to be cultivated in that same exact environment. And, there's so many different, Hayward's such a interesting place. It's one of the top 4 most diverse cities in the entire nation, and the socioeconomic divide is quite vast. You have a lot of people who migrate into America that come there, and just cultural differences too, and expectations. So it lended to all of that. And so when Paige and I stepped up and said, we want to move to the next level, luckily, we had parents that did end up supporting that and helping us develop. And then we had additional trainers at our disposal. But it wasn't a difference in that all. And just like you shared with your father, being able to step down and understand when it was no longer in his scope, I think is really, really invaluable for parents to kind of understand. If you want for your kid to get to that next level at some time, you need to put your ego down and allow them to actually grow.
Yeah, let them blossom at the next level, and hope that what you've done to that point is they're going to carry that on and then apply it and take on what the new coaches have. But
totally.
Yeah, going, with a lot of what you talked to me, you kind of, hinted or not hinted, but really talked about a couple of the sports that you played. So as a kid, did you play multiple sports? You talked about, you're a runner, you played soccer. Was there other sports, even, you wanted to be a ballerina, even, stuff like that, though? It's
all important
as a sport. It's an activity, but, I guess, what are some of the things that you did as a kid, and how did that bring you to at the point when you went on to college and choosing the specific sport that you wanted to do? Was it because you were good, you were passionate, or a combination of both? I guess if you could walk me through that. Yeah.
And I guess to kind of back that story up, where I'll start. So I grew up doing all of them. I was really lucky that I had parents that were open to me doing everything that I wanted to do in that capacity, in running and soccer. And so it was year round that we were doing that stuff. I did bailar folklorico, which is Mexican dancing, growing up in elementary school. And so I was able to kind of have that little bit. Then I did gymnastics for a brief period in elementary school as well. So I was able to be immersed in lots of different stuff and understand a little bit of different pieces. And then growing up watching my brother play roller hockey, I had parents that watched football. I grew up with season tickets to the Oakland A's. So I was really immersed in athletics all the time. It was something that I was constantly around. And so my own little ego at that point in time, especially in high school, I always wanted to prove guys wrong, in their belief that women were weak. And so one of my role models was Billie Jean King and Brandy Chastain. And I saw these really
great role models.
Yeah, they really were. And I had Title IX drilled into my head. I held in high school, I was the Associated Student Body Commissioner of Women Athletics. One of my homeroom teachers was the head of football. And I just was always big about like women in sports and women empowerment. And so that also drove a lot of like, I never wanted to seem less than any of the guys. So I was constantly learning about sports and like pushing myself, and just trying different things that I could, as well as, you know, cross country is such a man and women's sport, and as is track. So all of my teammates were men also too. So that kind of added to that varying degree. And then, like I learned how to rollerblade using my brother's roller blades at the age of probably like 8.
And so, you fit in them?
No, they did not fit. So we talk about scrappiness. And so that was very much who I was. I was that scrappy athlete. And my junior year of high school, I ended up getting injured. I had compartmental syndrome, which is typically an acute injury. What'll happen is like motorcyclists will get into an accident, and it's like having carpal tunnel like in your hand, but in your leg. And they had to go in and do a fasciotomy. Unfortunately, my recovery was much longer than what I had anticipated. And when I went into high school, I knew that I wanted to graduate with 12 letters, and I wasn't about to not do that. So I ended up going out and playing golf my senior year so that I could get that additional letter. I had a friend, one of my very close friends in high school, brought me out, and I picked that up, and it's something that my son and I now enjoy together. And I really want to be able to have more time spent on the golf course, because the mental game associated with it, and just my own, again, like personal stubbornness in wanting to like push my body to see what I can do. I really want to dive more into that, but that's a whole different conversation. So when I graduated high school, having those 2 years when I really wasn't able to be at my full capacity, I ended up developing a pretty severe eating disorder, which I'm going to be very careful in how I say this, because I don't want to make the assumption that like eating disorders are great, but it lended well to the athlete that I ended up becoming in college. And so again, going back to that story of what we were all told as kids, that like in my family, that we weren't going to be able to go away to school unless we did so on a full ride scholarship. When I graduated high school, I wasn't going to be going on to the next level. I was, to be very frank and honest, I was fairly overweight for my size at that point in time. I hadn't been able to work out at my like full capacity, and you know, to be a really strong athlete at that point in time, like it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time in the weight room, and we just didn't have those resources at my high school, to be quite frank. Hayward, again, going back to that socioeconomic divide, we just didn't have those resources. And we also didn't have the knowledge of like the nutrition and, you know, the mindset stuff. All of that really plays into being able to step into that next level. And I just wasn't there. I didn't have all of those tools before. So when I sucked it up, as I like to say, and went to the junior college, the local junior college. And I played that fall. I ended up playing my last year of league soccer so that I could play one last year with my younger sister. And it was going to be my last year having my dad as a coach. And so we did that. And it was a time that I felt very lost, and I didn't know exactly who I was, which is part of why I clinged so much to that eating disorder, as well as like knowing that I needed to try and manipulate my body at that point in time to be something to get myself further on. And I didn't want to stay in my hometown. I knew that I wanted to get out, and my ticket out was going to be on that track or on that soccer field.
Okay.
I actually kind of felt that it was going to end up being on the track more than the soccer field, because I just also wasn't a very secure person, clearly, by, latching on to an eating disorder. I didn't feel confident enough, like, in that arena, and didn't allow myself to feel confident that, like, I felt more at home and in control, I guess would actually kind of be the best way to describe it, on the track and on the cross country course. And so what I did that following spring was my first JUCO track season, and I ended up being number 4 in Northern California in the 800.
Okay, what JUCO were you?
I went to Chabot,
okay.
And also, so Chabot Junior College has a sister junior college in Pleasanton, Livermore, I guess technically, called Las Positas. And the two of them are joined together, like, as sister colleges. And so if one has one sport and the other one doesn't, like, you can simultaneously be an athlete for either one and only go to school at one of them, if that makes sense. So, like,
that makes sense.
I was taking classes at Chabot, and then in the following fall, I ended up running cross country for Las Positas, and at the same time playing soccer for Chabot. And so what I started to do and stepped into was, like, that summer, right after that, like, fairly successful junior college track season, is I spent all of my time working my butt off, like, quite literally. And again, like, while not nourishing myself, but I was in the weight room all the time. I took a weight class. I was training intensely. We had an amazing soccer coach at Chabot, Tony Igwe. He actually played for the Nigerian national team, and he had a long history of breeding champion soccer players. All of his kids are absolutely amazing. In fact, I believe one of his daughters is over in the UK, and I, like, hopefully am not misspeaking, but she went on and played in Europe. I know that. And both of his sons, I believe one of them played in the MLS, but Tony, like, bred amazing soccer players. And so we were having our butt kicked, but I wasn't training for cross country. I would literally go out on the weekends and just race, and just to see what happens, and to continue to get my name out there. And I started to have schools interested in me after that spring track. So it kind of, to go back to your original question of, like, how I ended up choosing my path that I took as soon as I got into the junior college, by making that decision to spend that fall season of what would have been JUCO soccer in the league soccer arena, I kind of forfeited, I guess, in a way, that decision to go on and play soccer.
Okay.
I could have, potentially, but I started to have schools interested in me. So I started to see my ticket out immediately. And that's what I kind of ended up jumping at. In that fall, I had a school, the University of Southern Mississippi, wanted me immediately because I was a qualifier out of high school, which has to do with the NCAA and academics. I was able to write that ticket out, like, right away. And I took go ahead.
So this was, you did 1 year, for junior college or JUCO, and those listeners out there that what JUCO means is junior college, is just an abbreviation of it. You spent 1 year at JUCO, and you ran that spring, and then that's when you said Southern Miss started talking to you. So they started and brought you out in your second year of your collegiate career?
Yep. So by all technicalities, I ran that spring, like, at the end of my very first year at Chabot. And then the fall, I did soccer and cross country simultaneously. I ended up breaking the school record at Las Positas for cross country, which was, it wasn't a great school record, but something that was so cool.
Record's a record.
That I was able to achieve. And then my coach at Southern Miss had actually come from DVC, which is in the Bay Area junior college circle. And so she knew to look at California junior college athletes for recruits, because she knew that California is such an interesting hub for sports because it is so densely populated and competitive, to be quite honest. Like athletics are on that next level here. Like I ended up going on to run with kids in college who made it to state every single year, and hearing their times, I would be like, you wouldn't have even made it out of the league, and so anyways, Coach Goodson knew to look to the junior colleges.
Sorry to before you get on, but I'll second what you're saying with the the California JUCOs, and this is not to say that any junior colleges throughout the rest of the United States aren't good. There's a lot of good ones out there, but at least speaking on baseball, and baseball was my sport all through college. It was often recommended that if you weren't ready for that 4-year level college or that 4-year level, that you go to a JUCO in California. And if someone like me who I graduated as a 17-year-old, so I was a little bit behind in terms of maturing. It was great for me because I went to California JUCO and spent actually 3 years there, because I travel redshirted my first year, and that helped me grow into a better athlete, where I ended up as a pitcher throwing harder, and then eyes from D1s or even D2s and AIs, they're on those JUCOs in California, and it gave me the opportunity to move on to Division I. So there's the level, and I don't know, I got to check on this, but at the time California still has its own JUCO system where playoffs and championships are done in California only, and I think the rest of the United States shares a championship game together. So that kind of shows a little bit of how California prides itself in its sports or its junior college sports. But great platform for people like Southern Miss, like you're saying, to take a look at you
Yeah, it really was. And it's something that I'm forever grateful for, especially that she knew to look there. Because I think it's also partially the stigma that gets held specifically in the Bay Area, where it's not valued as much to go to start at that junior college level. And it's something that I am forever grateful for, to be honest. I didn't value it as much at the time, but I wasn't ready for a 4-year college by any means when I graduated high school. I've realized I've always kind of taken I'm a bit of a late bloomer in many ways, and to really come and find myself and be able to have those resources, like have athletic trainers, have weight rooms, have coaches that really understood. And not to say anything about my coaches in high school. I had amazing coaches in high school, but it just takes a lot to really cultivate an athlete. And I wasn't as hungry, I think, for it in high school, and needed to have all of those those cards fall into place that way. And it's I'm so glad that I had a coach that understood it at Southern Miss. So when I took my official visit, I ended up falling in love with the girl who would end up becoming my roommate, as well as the team and the program. And I knew deeply that I wanted, at the time originally, I thought I wanted to go into athletic training. So I knew that I wanted to go to a school that had a big football program, and Southern Miss just really checked off all of those boxes. And the only other school at that period of time in the fall that was very hungry to have me was a school in Michigan. And I ended up saying, I would never go to a school where it snows all the time. I ended up eating those words later on when I transferred and finished at Idaho State. But it's something that I'm forever grateful for, that she understood the type of athletes that were available, especially in the California junior college system, because they're such strong athletes and very intelligent people that can provide so much value to any college out there. And I think sometimes and this is just my perspective and in my experience of some of the conversations that I've had, people want those kids right out of high school. But when you get that like slightly more mature athlete who's a little bit more hungry because they know that they want to go on, those ones end up going on and really stepping fully into their like full self as an athlete, if that makes sense. And so that's exactly what ended up happening for me.
Okay, then that makes sense. And there's, and again, I apply everything in the baseball world because that's what I was part of. But there is often, universities that were known as, their JUCO transfer schools. They really liked junior college players that spent a couple years and then they transferred and they got them for 2 years. But there's also those universities that they wanted their athletes, straight out of high school because it gave them, 4 to 5 solid years to groom them into what they wanted to be and gave them all that time. So there's a different, approach for different universities out there, but similar.
And no disrespect to either one of them. Like it's just like there's 100 different ways to climb a mountain, and if it's something that you really want to go on and do, like my message to athletes out there is that like if you don't make it right out of high school, that doesn't mean that your ticket isn't written off. Like you still have 100% options.
Agree. Right.
Like if you're hungry for it, you can make it on. And like just like any of those stories of you hear about that 35-year-old dad who ends up finally making it to the NHL or, you have all of these just stellar stars. But kind of to lend into some more of, so all the listeners will understand. I looked at like some of the questions, like to kind of go on, like some of the questions that you were going to ask, what it takes to really mold a true athlete. Like it's going to take work. If you are hungry for it, you have to change. Bottom line, because that's exactly, without me really understanding that's exactly what happened to me when I went on to Southern Miss and how I stepped into becoming that next level athlete. Cause I shaved off 2.5 minutes of my 5K time.
Ooh, wow.
My first, which is when you really understand what that, like those types of numbers mean when you're at that D1 level. I also had a coach, that I am forever grateful for, who understood me as an athlete, who, I am the type of individual that is more quality over quantity. Okay. And she treated me, I walked in running the 800 and 1500 on the track, but man, when you step into that D1 world, those girls are sprinters. And I wasn't a sprinter at that point in time in my life. And she identified that and put me into the 5K on the track. And I excelled. And I almost broke her school record, but was like 1 second off, which is, she talks about it. She's shared many stories, but I am forever grateful for Coach Goodson and what it was that she did and who she saw me as an athlete, because a lot of coaches kind of wrote me off. I came in as this very temperamental, nobody knew exactly what was going to end up happening with me because I had compartmental syndrome. So it meant that like I was going to take a very different training approach. Mm-hmm. So I was she had me constantly in the pool. I was constantly cross training, and she trained me as though I was an 800-meter runner. But then I would go out and race the 5K. And that's part of how I ended up kind of going on. And I found during that time period, and I found yoga, and I ended up really attaching myself to yoga. And that's also what kind of allowed me to step up, because I learned how to control my breathing, and I learned how to control my body on the track. And I would literally be racing down the last 100 meters, and I could feel my body tense up, and all I would have to do was breathe. And there was so much power in that. But I would wake up. Had morning practice at 6 a.m. And that was one of either in the pool, we would be out running, I would be on the elliptical. And so I would be in a yoga class.
To interrupt you, but just to set the So what you're kind of going into here is you're talking about your training regimen now. Are you talking about like, this is at that Division I or that Southern Miss
Yep.
regimen? Okay. So keep going. Sorry to interrupt you, but just so those listeners out there understand, you're diving in here to what a training regimen is like for that D1 athlete, or even this could be applicable to a D2 or NAIA athlete. But this is from your experience. I think Southern Miss.
For my experience, though, this is like the training program, like that, just to set that stage for people to understand what it takes to step into that next level. And this isn't to like be discouraging, because I kind of went to a varying degree, but just in understanding that if you want to make it to that next level, you have to make changes in yourself. And so I cut out, like, I didn't spend as much time watching TV. I spent time doing core exercises, or I was doing an extra time in the weight room, or I was signed up for yoga classes. Like, I was doing everything that I could to make myself a machine, which is kind of crazy to think about. But that's, when you are a high caliber distance runner, that's what it takes. Like, your body is a machine. And so I was able to really blossom into myself by setting myself up for success in those ways. Okay. And I had a coach that really understood the mindset piece of it, because, like, especially as a runner, when you're out there for 17 minutes on a track, like, you're going to think, and your mind's going to tell you many times to give up. And that's kind of like what it is too, as an athlete in your daily practice. You're also dealing with classes, you're dealing with relationships, you're dealing with friendships. There's so much going on that if you're not rigid in, if you're not really set in stone, in all of those daily practices, to keep you grounded, it can end up breaking you in many ways. Yeah. And I'm just really thankful for the coach that I had there. I mean, and all of my coaches. Like, I had amazing coaches my entire life that I'm forever grateful for.
So like you're saying, like the difference in, that balancing that schedule is incredible. And it's something that a lot of people, when you're coming out of high school into college, even from JUCO to that 4-year level, for me, it's a huge balance of academics, weight class, of actually practice and games, and even the travel time that's included. And then, like you said, you're young, and you have relationships, and that it plays a part in it. And on top of that, the friendships that you're creating, that is all, a huge change when that person is going to that next level of a dedicated 4-year year-round university.
Completely.
And like you said, with the coaches and memorable ones, those are very, very important and different levels. And, for me personally, I had coaches at different levels, whether it's my high school coach who always motivated me, same as you, I had the great motivation, and he would give me his time and train with me, but I didn't have, access to weight rooms or anything like that, or understand that. But then carried that on to coaches, in different parts of my collegiate career, who all, different ones who spent time and I was able to connect with mentally, and they can understand how, I approached it and what the best learning process for me. That was so important. And totally. Making me want to continue to love the game and not get frustrated with it, because I had someone there that understood how I learned. And that's, for listeners, whether it's parents or athletes that are listening to this, it's not, every coach is not the same. Every coach is not going to understand how you learn personally. It's something that, there's a mix of luck. And when you're, not necessarily finding a team, but when you're choosing a university or team to play with, that's important. And understanding that coach's approach to teaching and getting those athletes to understand.
You bring up such a valuable point that I was kind of circling around also, that, taking the time to really vet coaches to make sure that they understand you, because for all of those reasons that, you know, you are created in one sort of way, I'm created in some sort of way, and making sure that you have a coach that understands your strengths and weaknesses and can help you learn how to balance them. And because I then went on to another program that everybody just did all of the exact same thing. And I also was just in a very different like mental place at that point in time that I crumbled. And I ended up not performing to my full potential, as well as I jumped into doing, at one point in time, I was doing like 100 miles a week. And so it was a very differing experience for me, where I went, when I was at Southern Miss, I was literally doing 30 miles maybe a week, and or 35 to 40 at tops miles a week, then to that additional tack on of like 60. And this was also me being a stubborn kind of athlete of wanting to prove to see if I could even do it. But I broke down, my body broke down, and I ended up being very injured and very sick for the following years in college. And so it didn't end up working out well for me. But yeah, it's again, vetting those coaches and making sure that it's the right fit, not really following my lead and jumping at that first opportunity. But I did feel very much at home. There was a comfort piece. I didn't just like take the first offer. I would have stayed if it didn't feel right. And it did for me. But you really need to be intentional and understanding of who you are, but also an understanding who you are yourself. Because I had teammates at both school, like colleges that I was at, and actually probably like my whole life, that put too much responsibility on the coach for their advancement as an athlete, and at their demise did that, so that they weren't allowing themselves to become the best version of themselves as athletes, because they thought that it was the coach's responsibility to create them into something. And it's a coach's responsibility to help cultivate an environment that allows an individual to succeed. However, you know, they can hand you a glass of water, but they can't pour it down your throat and make your body like digest it.
Right. And I think that's such an important piece of, what you're talking about, important point, is because what you just said is not only applicable, just in the sports world or athletes world, but that's something that carries on, post sports. If you're going out into the workforce, or, it's the same thing as having, a manager or a director. They can cultivate the environment, but you can't sit there and blame them for work that you're not getting done. Now, they are an important piece to that, again, and leading you in the right direction and giving you the resources to become a better employer, in the coach perspective, become a better player. But, you can't put full blame on a coach and your development, because that ultimately is on you. You take the resources you're given and make the best of them. And then if you don't have all the resources, you go out there and you find them. Or just make the best situation you can, and take it on yourself to say, this is the goal I have, and I'm going to get there. I'm going to use these resources, and hopefully this coach can aid me in getting to there. Yeah.
I think like understanding the agency that you have over yourself is so valid. And you bring up like such a great point of like, this isn't something that is only in that sports capacity. This is a life skill that you really need to cultivate and understand. So yeah, there's so much value in that. Yeah. So going on from there, we've talked about a lot of really cool parts of the process, or making an athlete, and what it was for you, Parris. So a lot of times when I talk to parents, something I like to ask is, and this is a heavy question, but is, what can I do to keep my kids interested, or my kid interested in sports? What would be your advice on that? And this is, obviously a very weighted question, and it could be a holistic view on it. I have my personal opinions, but curious to what you think. Totally. And this is actually something, as a parent, my son is 6.5 years old. And while trying to help, foster all of his interests, is something that I grapple with. So he started doing track, we have a summer track program locally at Chabot, that one of my old teammates is now the head coach of. And so it's been really fun to kind of be able to experience that together. And Grayson has absolutely loved that. At least that's what he tells me. And so I don't know if I'm vicariously living through him on some level, but he started doing that same CYO cross country program that I had been in. And Grayson has really bad asthma. And decided, after a couple of practices, that his asthma just was so painful that it was unenjoyable for him. And so where I've had to sit as a parent is one of the more challenging thing. And I'm probably going to have a little bit this might be an unpopular opinion, but I had to forego my expectation of that situation and understand that if he wasn't having a good time, I didn't want to ruin that experience for him. So I let him not do it. And I've also tried to allow him to find things that do light his soul on fire. So he loves karate right now. He's really into Japanese anime and all of that. And so, what I've had to do as a parent is forego my ego and allow him to find those things that he's passionate about and foster those in him, despite what it is that I think that he should be doing. And so he loves golf. And so we make time to go out and golf together. Me trying to be intentional as an adult, although I have things that I want to do, making sure that I'm setting him up for success to do those things that he's passionate about and to keep him jumping around doing a bunch of things. We've talked about him doing fencing because he's interested in sword fighting and just things that are kind of out of the norm. But that moment when I had to be if you don't want to run cross country, it's okay. And we also had this happen even with indoor soccer. And, I was living my dream when I first got him on that soccer field. I was pumped in every way, shape, and form. And when he started having breakdowns on the soccer field, I had to really sit there in that uncomfortable place as a parent of, when do you motivate him and push him forward and not let him just quit? And when do you understand that this isn't going to be fruitful for anybody if he continues in it? And so I think my advice to parents is drop your ego and let your kids decide what it is that they really want to do. And I know that's difficult. And again, kind of to circle back to my parents, I wanted to be a ballerina, and I like to, for a while, I would kind of prod and be I could have gone to Juilliard if you would have just allowed me. But I also wouldn't be who I am or where I am had I not had parents who put me in those places. So I don't know, it's a balance. And right. I think at some point you're going to have to know that you're going to end up paying therapy for therapy bills for it.
That's true. And I think, what you just described is such an admirable approach as a parent. And it's exactly as you say, it's trying to understand the balance of motivation versus, being forceful. And you can't force that passion into them. And from my experience as, an instructor and a coach, the hardest, the most lost causes I would see is when I was teaching someone who had a parent that was down their throat, yelling at them all the time. You can just tell that there's no passion and for that sport, and that they're there because they're being forced to. And then you can see the exact opposite of a kid who's not, who's just loves the game and they're taking everything in. But it's something that, in your response, I think that's such an admirable response. Going on. So, we're going to, looking to wrap up this great podcast, but we're going to do a speed round. But after that, I'm going to give one more question before speed round. And that's just, what would you do differently that you know today? And I know there could be many things, but if you could just hone in on one, lesson learned that a parent or an athlete out there listening could learn from during the process of moving on to that next level, what would that be?
Mm-hmm. I would have understood the power of mindset a lot earlier on, and I would have been meditating every single day because it's transformed my life as an adult. And I wish that I would have had that tool in my back pocket as an athlete, because I think that I like to believe that I could have gone on and done way more, but I'm also really thankful for the path that I walked. And I don't think I would have had to have struggled so much as an athlete had I had that tool set. So understanding the power of mindset, like truly, I think you hear all of these buzzwords all the time as an athlete, but really sitting in that place of understanding the power of it. And then that addition of meditation, because those two are very, they work simultaneously. Like you can't have one without the other, or one you can hypothetically, but they're not going to be as powerful. So mindset and meditation, I wish I would have had those much earlier on in my life. I don't think I would have had to have struggled so much as an adult.
That's awesome. That's something that is often, overseen is the mental approach to the game. It's just as important as the physical skills you need in playing your sport. So definitely as a parent athlete, take a look at that mental approach and understanding it better. All right. Yeah. So now speed round. This is what we do at the end of all of our podcasts, and just one word or one sentence, couple sentence answers. So favorite athlete role model growing up, and you mentioned it earlier, but let's hear it again. So favorite athlete role model.
I have three: Steve Prefontaine, Brandi Chastain, Billie Jean King.
Perfect. Favorite moment ever in your sports career?
Oh shit, this is hard. Probably my race at LSU when I almost broke Coach Goodson's record. That's probably one of the coolest. Either that or actually getting the full ride scholarship and getting to Southern Miss. I don't know. I'm one of those I'm a collector of all the good things.
That's okay. So that's perfectly fine. I know it's hard for an athlete to choose just one. They have. But I still play
through that race. I still can very vividly feel that feeling of running down that last 100 meter and watching the time tick. It was a really special moment.
That's awesome. And then last one, favorite professional sports moment that you got to witness.
Oh, I watched the U.S. I think it was 1998 when the women's U.S. team was in the Olympics, or not the Olympics, sorry, the World Cup. And they were playing at Stanford, and they had played, it wasn't Brazil. I think it might have been, I think it was Japan. Wow, you're good. And we stayed around. There was a men's expo game afterwards, and we had parked pretty far off. And as we were walking back to our car, this is now hours later. First of all, that game was amazing. My face was painted. I definitely painted a t-shirt for it. But on the way back, we walked by a hotel that ended up having an after party, and we got to, I schmoozed my way in, and I got to meet Brandi Chastain in person and her father, and I got a picture with them. And my parents were the District 4 CYSA tournament coordinators, and so we went to the CYSA expo every single year. And the year that Brandi Chastain was inducted into the Hall of Fame, we brought that picture, she actually ended up couldn't be there. Her parents were there. And so we gave the picture to her dad, and I had a jersey, and she mailed it all back with a letter and had signed stuff and added a bunch of additional stuff. So that moment of both meeting my idol, who then in the next game went on to take off her shirt after, doing the last goal of the penalty kicks. But that was such a cool moment, and all of those things being pieced together, something I hold with deep reverence, that I loved.
That was an amazing time or amazing experience. And I fact checked myself. It was 99 against China.
Yeah. Oh, that's who it was. I could
because they played Japan so much recently that I figured it was Japan USA, but it was China USA
because they went on and played Brazil, right, in the finals. I think it was, or maybe it was Brazil that they played at Stanford, and then went on to play China in the gold medal game. I forget, something like that. Just a fact check.
Yes, exactly. So awesome. Well, Parris, I greatly appreciate you getting on the Making an Athlete podcast and telling us about your experience as becoming, or as you were an athlete throughout your youth and to the college days, and talking about that process. It's important that we talk about this and getting understanding of the steps it takes to becoming that next level athlete. So thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you so much, Ty, for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Making an Athlete podcast. This podcast has been brought to you by our sponsor. Check us out at makinganathlete.com. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or on your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to catch our next episode.